Vice President Mike Pence appearing a little bit optimistic today, saying in that interview with Fox News that the U.S. is moving toward the first phase of reopening. And with that, we welcome you to our coronavirus pandemic special. I'm Leland Vittert, and Kristen, we have heard that they're looking forward to this for a while now.
They have indeed, and I'm Kristen Fisher. The Vice President's comments come as the U.S. confirms more than 730,000 coronavirus cases, with more than half now coming from the East Coast. Our Steve Harrigan is tracking how and where the virus is spreading. Steve?
Kristen, the U.S. is currently testing about 150,000 people a day. Researchers at Harvard say that number will need to triple if the U.S. is going to be able to safely reopen the economy. Vice President Pence a few hours ago said the U.S. was quickly ramping up its testing numbers.
We believe the testing that we have today, Chris, across the country, once we activate all of the labs that can do coronavirus testing, is sufficient for any state in America to move into phase one.
Not all states are waiting for new tests. The mayor of Jacksonville opened up the beaches. He put in place limited hours, restrictions on towels and chairs, but the crowd still came despite admonitions to keep up social distancing. The mayor of Miami said the beaches there would open up. He didn't say quite yet when. South Carolina also prepared next week to reopen its beaches. Texas, as well as Vermont, opening up some limited shopping next week as well with curbside pickup. This comes as there have been demonstrations in 8 different states calling on governors to ease economic restrictions. Those demonstrations in Arizona, California, Colorado, Maryland, Michigan, Texas, Utah, and Washington. Kristen, back to you.
Steve Harrigan, live in Atlanta. Steve, thank you. Leland?
Amid all that uncertainty, the showdown over testing and reopening continues between the nation's governors and the White House. The vice president said today that the U.S. could double its testing once states activate all of their labs. The blame game continues. Mark Meredith joins us from the White House ahead of today's coronavirus task force briefing. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon, Leland. The administration says more and more tests are being conducted every day. As Steve Harrigan mentioned, right now, 150,000 tests being done daily. But the White House believes if state governments work with the federal government, that number could go up significantly. Vice President Mike Pence talked about this on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace earlier today.
Now we've cleared 4 million overall, but at 150,000 tests a day, we think we can double that number by working with governors to activate all of the laboratories in their states around the country that can do coronavirus testing. That would put us at roughly 300,000.
But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is blasting the president over his response to the outbreak. She's calling him a weak leader and says with states still struggling to get testing done quickly, the blame rests with the White House.
We're way late on it, and that is the failure. The president gets an F, a failure on the testing. He doesn't take responsibility. He places blame on others. And that might have been okay for before, but we cannot continue down a path that is, again.
Meanwhile, a number of protests, as Steve mentioned, have been popping up in cities nationwide. This is the one yesterday in Annapolis, Maryland. The president was asked about the protests with people fed up about staying at home, and he says some of these demonstrations make sense to him.
There are a lot of protests out there, and I just think that some of the governors have gotten carried away. You know, you have a lot of people that don't have to be told to do what they're doing.
The president will have a chance to speak to the governors again tomorrow. We are expecting an update from the president, as you mentioned, Leland, at 5. Also want to mention we had a chance to talk to the Treasury Secretary this morning. He says for people that are still waiting for those stimulus payments, those people that need that money, direct deposits are still going on, but you can go onto the IRS website to make sure they have your information. And if you're looking for that paper check, those will begin starting to roll out next week. Leland?
And they're still working today on that deal for refunding PPP. Mark Meredith at the White House. Back to you as events warn throughout the afternoon. Thanks, Mark. Kristen?
Well, some governors are taking steps to gradually reopen their states and lift restrictions on certain businesses. Joining us now, Nebraska Republican Governor Pete Ricketts. Governor, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I'd like to start by asking you, you were one of the very few governors, one of the handful of governors who did not decide to impose a statewide stay-at-home order. How is that decision working out for you and your state?
Well, so far, I think the approach we've taken in Nebraska has been right for Nebraska. We've asked Nebraskans to do the right thing. Even though we haven't put a formal order in place, we have asked people to stay home this month. We put 6 rules in place around stay home, don't have unessential trips, work, but work from home if you can, and socially distance if you're going into the workplace. If you are shopping, shop once a week by yourself. Don't take the family. Help kids, help seniors, exercise in an appropriate way. These 6 rules are the things we've used to try to really help Nebraskans to be able to follow the guidelines, be able to socially distance, and that's what's helping us be able to slow the spread of virus here in our state.
Governor, since you bring up shopping, I'd like to ask you a question about a shopping mall, an outlet mall that's doing something a little bit different. Some people love it, some people don't like it. It is the Nebraska Crossing Outlets, and they're planning a soft opening on April 24th. And here's just a few of the things that they are planning to do when they reopen. They're going to place strict limits on the number of shoppers allowed in stores. They're going to use hospital-grade disinfectants on surfaces. And this is the big one, they're going to take the temperatures of customers before they can enter stores. Do you think that this is a good idea, allowing this shopping mall, this outlet mall, to reopen in just 5 days in this way?
Well, Kristen, I think the important thing to note here is that we haven't closed any shopping malls. So anything they did with regard to closing stores was entirely voluntary. And if they are following social distancing guidelines, that's what's appropriate for everybody. For example, with our big box stores here in Omaha, our largest city, we asked them to do more than they were doing, and they were very accommodative in being able to do that, doing some of the same things you're talking about, limiting the number of customers coming in, putting tape on the floor to make sure customers would stay 6 feet apart and checkout lines. And so those big box stores have all been open this entire time. And I think that's one of the keys. We've really tried to get people to do the right thing with regard to that social distancing so that we can slow the spread of virus, and it's been working.
Governor, a lot of other governors, Republicans and Democrats, have said that they still feel like they do not have enough tests or supplies to conduct tests. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like the testing capacity in your state is sufficient?
Well, I don't think there's a single governor who thinks they have enough testing that they want to do. You can always do more. And we have, been contacted by the federal government. Some of the things you had on earlier with Vice President Pence talking about how we can open up more capacity here in our state. We're looking to do that. We've tried a variety of creative things like pooling samples in our public health lab, and that has allowed us to be able to expand the number of tests we can do. And we're looking at different channels of ways to be able to expand it, different types of tests, and so forth. And I think the other thing to really keep in mind here is that testing is just a tool. At the end of the day, what this is all really about is not overwhelming your healthcare system, to make sure that anybody who needs that hospital bed, who needs that ICU bed, or needs that ventilator can get access to that. If you are meeting that goal, and the testing only helps you meet that goal, the testing is not an end in of itself. It's about making sure you keep your hospital system and your healthcare system available. If you're doing that, you're winning the battle.
Understood. And Governor, one more quick question, if I could. I know your state doesn't have, or I believe you're not seeing any of the protests like we're seeing in states like Michigan, Maryland, things of that nature, but certainly you're seeing them, hearing about them. Do you support what the protesters in those states are doing?
Well, I think everybody wants to get this opened up as quickly as possible. And, the way we rolled out our restrictions here in Nebraska, we did it regionally, because even within the state of Nebraska, it's very different between Omaha and some of our rural communities. And so I think that what every governor needs to do is be thinking about how can I tailor my response to meet the needs specifically in local areas and local communities, and then make sure that if I don't have to be more restrictive in other areas, that I'm finding ways to loosen those restrictions. Again, still monitoring, testing is a tool, monitoring to make sure the virus doesn't spread too quickly. But as long as you're not overwhelming your healthcare system, you can do that.
Got it. Governor Ricketts, I got to leave it there. Thank you so much, and stay safe.
Great. Thanks, Kristen.
And now we go west from Nebraska to Washington State. In that state, construction is not considered an essential business. So under Governor Jay Inslee's stay-at-home order, construction is supposed to stop. But 3 towns are allowing construction companies to defy those orders. Dan Springer live in Seattle as we are seeing more of this local control question around the country. Hi, Dan.
Yeah, that's right, Leland. We're starting to see more individuals protesting these restrictions, but also some small cities that are starting to give some of their residents the green light to go back to work. In Lyndon, Washington, a city of about 15,000 residents along the border with Canada, leaders sent a letter to construction companies telling them to continue building homes and commercial projects even though they were halted by Governor Jay Inslee's stay-at-home order. Washington, along with New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, are the only states to ban all private construction except where buildings might be damaged. Inslee says workers support his strict policy.
I haven't seen that letter yet, but I do know that we've made real progress in our talks with the construction industry and the people who work in it to figure out some protocols to be able to get back to full construction.
But critics point out that Inslee's order allows government projects to move forward, calling them essential. Meantime, the rest of the industry has been decimated. New unemployment claims have jumped by 70,000 in construction in the last 3 weeks. A trade group estimates workers have lost $503 million in wages, or $23 million every day. They insist the work can be done safely and needs to be done to keep lives from being destroyed economically.
If you're a small business owner and you're going to go bankrupt and lose your entire life savings, you're going to find ways to get back to work as quickly as possible, and we need to work with people to get that done. I care about the virus, I care about the health, but we cannot let this thing destroy our entire economy here in Washington State, in Lyndon, or in the country. We got to fight back.
Republican lawmakers in the state are urging Governor Inslee to start easing back on some of the restrictions, and there's a protest at the Capitol in Olympia today along those same lines. We'll see if Inslee does anything. His order stays in effect until May 4th. Leland?
Yeah, especially at the Maryland Capitol yesterday, we saw a lot of those construction work trucks in those protests. We'll see if it's the same in Olympia today. Dan, thank you. Kristen?
On Capitol Hill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told Fox News that a second wave of funding for that Paycheck Protection Program could be coming soon as congressional lawmakers continue to work to try to strike a deal on another relief package. Fox congressional correspondent Chad Pergram has the very latest on these negotiations. Hey, Chad, so when do you think we could finally see a deal?
Well, they're hoping in the next couple of days. The pressure is on to get a deal this week, and that's because the Small Business Fund is dry. Now, the Vice President, Mike Pence, appearing on Fox News Sunday this morning, said they're, quote, close. Republicans want to focus the bill on small business to the tune of about $251 billion. Democrats want some other things in this bill, helping state and local governments and also access to capital for underserved communities. Here's the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
We're not going afield in any other thing. And also to make sure that everyone has access to the program. I'm very pleased at the progress that is being made. We've worked in a very bipartisan way all along. We continue to do so.
If they can forge an agreement, the hope is that the House and the Senate can come back and approve this interim measure with the skeleton staff on hand. But Democrats are concerned about other provisions, such as helping state and local governments. Some counties own local hospitals, and they are strapped. The Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, says those demands will have to wait.
The president is willing to consider that in the next bill. We're already distributing money to the states. We've distributed about half of the money last week. We'll distribute the rest of the money this week, and we'll consider that in the next bill. But right now we're focused on small business and hospitals.
Now, if you're keeping score, this is really the Phase 3.5 bill. This is a bridge bill. Phase 4 is something that's already being negotiated off stage here. Again, $250 billion is the core of this bill for small business. That's a gigantic number. That's about 1/5 of all the money that Congress appropriates every year to run the federal government, and already that they have spent $2.5 trillion to combat the coronavirus crisis. Kristen.
Wow, you always know how to put it in perspective for us. Chad Pergram, thanks so much. Leland?
The price tag just keeps going up and up. For more on this, we bring in Democratic Michigan Congressman, Chief Deputy Whip of the House Democratic Caucus, Dan Kildee. Nice to see you, sir. We appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks, Leland.
Reasonable people seem to agree that PPP is working. It's keeping small businesses alive, and it is keeping employees on the payroll of these small businesses rather than unemployed and trying to get an unemployment check. All good things, and it's keeping landlords paid. Why not just pass a clean bill for $250 billion, refund it, and then debate all these other issues later?
Well, obviously, we are going to have to debate these other issues. We're hoping to be able to do more than one thing at a time. Local governments are struggling. In fact, my county government just laid off numbers in the hundreds, so they're getting hit right away. But to the point about the PPP program, it is successful, but it's not as successful as we'd like it to be. Many of the really small businesses are not getting help, and there seems to be disparity between the states. Michigan has the second highest number of unemployment filings, but we're way down on the list in terms of the number of PPP loans that have been offered.
Congressman, this wouldn't be the first government program that hasn't worked perfectly. We can all agree on that.
Sure.
And also, this ran out of money last week. There's a number of businesses that I've talked to that have shut down in this interim week, that have had to lay people off. Every day that Congress waits is days that people are going to be laid off and rents aren't going to get paid. So why let great be the enemy of good?
Well, because we have to we can take a day or two, and they're negotiating right now to make sure that all those really small businesses also get help. I've been working in a bipartisan fashion with a piece of this to get a really small business program included in this. The very smallest businesses, the ones that are at greatest risk, are not getting the help they need. So you're right, we need to move quickly. And frankly, Congress has been, relative to other issues, moving at lightning speed. We passed 3 bipartisan bills in March, more than we've done in quite some time. So, but you're right, we got to get it done. We want to make sure the details are right so that the small bakery or beauty shop doesn't get left behind.
Point well made, especially.
Never stand up again.
Yeah, point well made, especially as it relates to getting help to those small businesses to be able to file, depending on which banks they've had. We had people on both sides of that on. Want to move you to the state of Michigan, where you are now. As you so eloquently pointed out, that unemployment in Michigan is incredible and it is devastating. We had a sheriff on yesterday who said as much. One of the things the president has tweeted about is liberating, in his words, opening up some of these states. Here's the president about those protests. Take a listen.
I'm getting along very nicely with the governor of Michigan, but she has things: don't buy paint, don't buy roses, she's got all these crazy things. I really believe somebody sitting in their boat in a lake should be okay. They shouldn't arrest people. Some of them are being unreasonable.
Does he have a point that perhaps the governor went a little too far in this?
No, I think it's a really difficult thing to decide when we're going too far, when the restrictions are working and they're actually saving lives. There can be a debate about where to draw the line, but the protesters in Lansing the other day were protesting against the governor's authority to do any of this, that she shouldn't have the authority to impose any of these